Hello and welcome to our R3H3. My name is Leticia Palmadesi, but a lot of people just call me Tish. You can do that if you'd like, or Leticia is fine also. I'm part of the R3 team that helps market and promote and do outreach for the Hunter Angler Recruit, Retain, Reactivate effort, also known as R3. And these Harvest Huddle hours are a virtual program that we use to engage with adult audiences that are just starting out or returning to their journey in hunting, fishing, foraging, and shooting sports. The information provided during these huddles is really meant to help people break through or break down some of the information barriers and provide a confidence boost to all participants. Today, we have a very informative and knowledgeable panelist that will talk about shotgun fit and purchase, and how both of those lead into and play a part of shotgun safety and how important all of this is to being a responsible hunter. In fact, because owning a shotgun is such a big responsibility and we don't want to cut any corners, we're just going to be upfront and let you know that our session will likely go a little over today, a little longer than the hour. With the Q&A, the huddle might go until about 1:15, 1:20. We understand if you can't, make it that long, you have to cut out early, don't worry. All of our sessions are recorded and will be available on the department's R3 webpage within a few days. So before we get started, just some housekeeping. For those new to Zoom, you can change the way your screen looks by clicking on the top right icons. There are two views, gallery and presenter. Feel free to play around with it. What you select won't affect what everyone else sees, so whatever you prefer. At the end of the session, there will be an opportunity for audience participation in Q&A. We will be using the Q&A feature for this. The Q&A feature can be located at the bottom of your screen. This little icon that looks like two little text bubbles. Please click on that to open the dialog box, and then you can type in your question, hit enter to submit, and then our moderators will try to get through as many questions as we can. So please feel free to just ask as many questions as you like. As I mentioned, all sessions are recorded and will be available on the department's R3 webpage. The website for that is wildlife.ca.gov/R3. And once I fix the chat issue that we're having right now, we'll include that in the chat for you. But you can find past R3H3 recordings there under the California Wild Kitchen tab. Now, let's introduce our team that I've been talking about. On Q&A and answering your questions and fielding them to our presenters, we have CDFW R3 Coordinator Jen Benedette and Robert Karam from the R3 team out of the Office of Communication, Education, and Outreach. We also have Lieutenant Sean Olagi and James Reed from our Law Enforcement Division. So a big thank you to them for helping us today. And now we do our best to answer everyone during this event, but if for some reason we don't get to your question or it's outside of the scope of today's presentation, please submit your question to our email and one of us will get back to you as soon as we can. And the email is statewide-r3program@wildlife.ca.gov. We also will add that to the chat too once I fix that. Now for our presenter, Holly Heyser. She is the Communication Director of California Waterfowl and an avid volunteer for CWA's Becoming an Outdoors Woman program. She is an adult onset hunter who struggled, quote, mightily with her shotgun skills in her early hunting years due to her cross dominance, very long neck, and general lack of hand-eye coordination. This is from her, not me. Today, she takes great joy in helping other new hunters master shooting, find shotguns that fit them well, or adjust the shotguns so they have to improve fit. And we are so happy that she's here for us today. So let's jump right in, and remember, if questions come up, use the Q&A and we'll get those questions answered after Holly's presentation. With that, Holly, you can take it away.
All right, let's see. I'm hoping everyone can see my screen clearly now. And I'm gonna move a few things on my screen, get them out of my way. And there we go. So I am so excited to be here with everyone today. It's been 15 years since I was a new adult onset hunter, but it was baffling taking on hunting, and my guns were a mystery to me. So I very much empathize with where you are right now. And that's one of the reasons I love helping new hunters. I especially love helping them with issues of shotgun fit and shotgun purchases, because it's just not that easy to do. You can't just order one on Amazon. So thank you all for being here today and for your interest. And thank you to DFW for hosting this important information, because I think this will be really helpful to folks. So to reiterate, this is aimed at new hunters and also some returning hunters. There may be some people here who are rifle hunters and have never bought a shotgun before. but I'm going to gear this mostly toward new hunters who may or may not have taken hunter ed. I will make a lot of hunter ed references in this presentation. At the end, you'll also see my email address. I'm very happy to take questions from people afterward. So I want to go over what we're talking about today. We're going to talk about what type of shotgun to buy. We're going to talk about gun fit and understanding why it's actually a thing. I'm going to go over a little bit about how to buy a shotgun and what's involved in it. We're going to talk about safety considerations. For many of you, this may be the first time you've brought a gun into the home. And so we're going to talk about how to stay safe when you're doing that. I'm going to talk to you about how to practice with your new gun. This is essential. You can't just buy a gun and walk out in the field and start hunting. You have to learn how to use it. And as Tish mentioned, this will be going online, so you will be able to catch up on things. Sometimes I get really excited and I talk too fast. So if you miss something I said, you're going to be able to come back to all of this. And like I said, I'd be happy to respond to your email. So first, let's launch straight into what type of shotgun to buy. Before we do that, though, I want to have a little note here about recoil, because this is something that's going to come up a lot in this presentation. So first of all, what is recoil? Recoil is what happens when you pull the trigger and the propellant lights and the shot goes firing out of one end of the gun. And if you remember physics, there's an equal and opposite reaction that goes primarily into your shoulder. And I have just exhausted my physics knowledge. I apologize to my high school physics teacher that I can't say more than that. But I'm going to show you what recoil looks like in this little short video here.
Pull.
So that's it. That's what recoil is. It's just a shove to the shoulder, and it's highly, highly variable. So one of the important questions is, will recoil bother you? I will tell you that sometimes it bothers me at the shooting range. It never bothers me when I'm hunting, because I'm very focused on what I'm hunting. I can tell you that in my experience working with new hunters, I found women to often be very concerned about recoil. And then once they get started with it, if they have a good gun that works well for them, it's not an issue for them. So it's highly variable. I don't want to scare you about recoil because it's not that big of a deal, and I spend very little time thinking about it. So there's several things that affect felt recoil. And when people are talking about guns, they always talk about felt recoil because the recoil is the same no matter what. Physics is physics is physics. But there are things about the gun and about how you hold the gun that affect how much of that recoil you feel. So with guns, the heavier the gun, the less recoil you feel. This is really important to know because I find a lot of folks who are smaller in stature would like a lighter gun because guns are heavy and you got to carry them in the field all day. But the lighter your gun, the more recoil you feel. So that's a trade-off you have to keep in mind. The shells you shoot affect recoil. A big heavy hunting load is going to kick harder than a light target load. Gun also has, some guns have construction that are designed to reduce recoil. And some guns, the actual way they work reduces recoil. And also how well you shoulder the gun affects recoil, because, well, affects how it feels to you. If your gun is not firmly mounted into your shoulder and you pull the trigger, it'll slam against you. So that's really important to keep that gun firmly in the shoulder pocket. And I will tell you this, be very, very careful with children because they can be super recoil sensitive. I have two friends right now who have daughters who love going out and hunting ducks with their daddies, but they're really afraid of recoil. So they aren't, even though they've done their hunter ed and they have licenses, they aren't hunting yet. So you got to make sure that first introduction is as gentle as possible with kids. Adults, we'll be fine, we'll get over it, but kids are a little bit more sensitive. So be aware of that if you're also thinking about bringing your child into hunting with you. I know many people start hunting with their children. All right, so let's get started on the types of shotguns. The first type of shotgun I want to talk about is the pump. And this is the gun that makes that sound when you are cycling the ammo through it. The first thing I'm going to tell you about each gun type is what statement it makes. And that might seem really silly and frivolous, but when you choose a shotgun, you want to choose one that matches your personality. So here's the statement the pump makes. Simple basics are great for me. I don't need fancy things. Literally everyone I know who shoots a pump, this is their attitude. So that's what a pump says. And the reason for that is that, well, first of all, pumps are super affordable. You can buy a high-end pump for way less money than a low-end semi-auto, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So it's a very affordable gun. A great pump can cost $500 or $600. The construction is very, very simple, which means you have fewer mechanical parts to fail. It's also easier to clean. Simple construction is way easier for cleaning than complicated construction. You get 3 or more shots. Now, the reason I say 3 or more is that in most hunting contexts, you can only have 3 shells in your gun. So shotguns, however, can hold more than that in the magazine sometimes. The magazine is where the extra shells are. The chamber is where the one is that you're about to shoot. So many shotguns have come with the plug already in them. You need to make sure that your shotgun holds no more than 3 shots. So the pump will give you the maximum that you can hunt with. Like I said, it's a little more complicated a little more complicated gun. It's also more complicated to operate because what you do is you take the shot, bang, and then you have to work that pump to cycle out the spent round and work it back forward to load a new round into the magazine. Now that can slow you down a little bit. For a while, I considered getting a pump because I'm such a spaz, I would take my second shot too quickly. So if you think you might be a little bit spazzy, that pumping action will actually slow you down. And you do get used to it. It's very awkward at first, but I have done slow-mo video of people shooting their pumps and they're so smooth and they don't even have to think about it. So something to consider. So here's the biggest downside to most pumps. There is little to no recoil protection in most of them. Now, the gun that we saw in that video was a Benelli. They have some recoil protection stuff built into that stock. So there's a little bit of protection there, but there's no fancy mechanisms that help you with recoil. So be aware of that. All right, on to the next type of shotgun, which is the semi-auto. So a semi-auto, if you look here, there's a button. That's one of the features you'll commonly see in a semi-auto is that's how you load the gun. And this gun does all the cycling of rounds for you. And the statement a semi-auto makes is comfort and ease mean a lot to me. I tend to shoot semi-autos. I love semi-autos. And I would say comfort and ease definitely means a lot to me. So these are mid-range in the price tree for shotguns. A really nice high-end shotgun, and I like really nice high-end shotguns. A really nice one will cost you $1,900. So that's getting up there. It's a more complicated construction. So theoretically, there's more mechanical parts to fail, although a well-built gun, you're not going to deal with failure very often. That also makes it a total pain to clean because there's all these funky little parts. Now, semi-autos work 2 different ways. It either uses the inertia of that recoil and it takes some of the recoil that would go into your shoulder and it channels it into cycling out the spent round and cycling in a new round. Other guns are gas operated, so they take the gas from that little tiny explosion of firing a shot shell, and I know it's not an explosion, but that's the word I'm using on this. They take that gas and they use that to cycle the round just the way the other guns use inertia for it, to do it. So if you have a gas gun, they tend to get pretty dirty because all that gas is kicking around in all your moving parts. So you need to clean them a little bit more aggressively. I typically spend about ½ hour cleaning my gun, but I have a really good gun, so I don't have to clean it every single time I shoot it. Semi-autos also have 3 or more shots, so they give you the maximum you can have when you're hunting. They're super easy and fast to operate. When I am firing, bang, bang, bang. So super fast. And they have the best recoil protection because, as I said, whether they're using the gas or the inertia, they're channeling some of what would go into your shoulder and channeling it into cycling the rounds. In addition, many high-end guns also have fancy stuff built into the stock that acts like a shock absorber, so it affects that felt recoil. Last gun, break action. If you watched cartoons when you were a kid and you watched Elmer Fudd, this is the type of shotgun that Elmer shoots, except I'm pretty sure he shoots a side-by-side. This is an over-under. So it's called a break action because you can see you break it open here to take out a spent round and put in new live rounds. These make a definite statement, and that is I love tradition, elegance, style, and status. So this is a gun that can cost a lot more money. So I think really nice break action guns, they can go for $4,000. You can also get them cheap. You can get them for $500. But a good one, maybe 4,000. I've spent some time at the Beretta Gallery in Manhattan. Bet you didn't know there was a gun gallery in the middle of Manhattan, but there is. And they actually let me touch a $150,000 gun, which was very scary. It's like, you shouldn't let me touch this gun. It made me feel, it made me worried. This gun has a very, very simple construction, and that means there's fewer parts to fail, and it's super easy to clean. For most of my early hunting years, my boyfriend was shooting an over-under. I was shooting a semi-auto. Sometimes we would clean our guns together. He would be done in, a minute, and I would be done half an hour later. This gun will only have 2 shots. There are also break action guns that have only 1 shot, like a single shot 410. Single shot 410 is a very popular choice for kids because of potentially light recoil. And it also teaches them to be very controlled because they only have 1 shot in the gun. So if you think you might want that 3rd shot, you won't get that with this gun. It's the slowest to reload, slower than a pump, because you've got to break it open, take out the spent shells, pop the new shells in. So this will really slow you down if you think follow-up shots are needed. And typically there is no extra recoil protection in this gun. All it's got going for it is how heavy it is. Now, I will say there's an exception to that. Benelli has a model out that has recoil protection built into the stock. So there is an exception, but for the most part, they don't have extra recoil protection. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about is what gauge of shotgun to choose. So these are all different shot shells here. And when we talk about the gauge, we're talking about the diameter of the shell, not the length. And these are a 12, 16, 20, 28, and 410. And that is measured typically in these numbers, 10 through 28. They didn't show a 10 in the photo there, sorry about that. The 410 at the end, that's actually a caliber. And so this is how the shot size differs on, or the shell size differs on these. And here's why it matters. So 10 and 12 gauge shells hold the most pellets. So if you've got a 3-inch shell and it's that much wider in diameter, then it has more pellets in it. Having more pellets in your shot shell will improve your chances of hitting what you are shooting at. It kind of helps compensate if your shooting is a little bit off. So if you're a really good shot, you can do just fine with this, what they call the sub gauges. So 16, 20, 28, and 410. I have a friend whose little girls both shoot single shot 410s, and they have taken everything from quail to swans. And I'm going to say they don't live in California. Swan hunting is not legal here, but they live in states where it is legal. So don't let anyone tell you that a 410 or a 28 or a 20 isn't going to be good enough for what you're hunting. Generally, sub gauges kick less, and generally they make less noise, but that also depends on what shells you're using. So that's just a very basic rule of thumb with lots of exceptions. Now, here's an important thing. If you are planning on becoming a duck hunter and you have friends at nice duck clubs, or you're thinking about joining a nice duck club, increasingly in California, we're seeing duck clubs require 20 gauge or smaller for their hunting. And they do that for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is with fewer pellets in the gun, they think hunters are just a little bit more conservative with their shooting. And less shooting is always a better thing when you're out there hunting, because shooting is disturbance. I will also tell you this. It actually reduces the noise and bird disturbance. And that sounds a little crazy because it's a shotgun, it goes bang. And yes, in fact, it is really loud. But I have hunted at a club where they used to be anything goes. And then one year they switched to 20 gauge or less. And I will tell you, it was absolutely noticeable that after gunfire, the birds came back into the area more quickly. So it's a legit thing that they're doing there when they require 20 gauge or smaller. Ammo is most widely available for 12 gauge and 20 gauge, and this is particularly important in California, and especially important these days because there's a serious ammo shortage. So you can't just, if you're going to shoot one of those other odd gauges and you want to go to the store the night before a hunt and pick up some shells, you can be prepared to be disappointed. So if you want to play it safe, a 12 and 20 is going to be the easiest to ammo up for. Also, a note for women here, when I started hunting, I asked a friend I respected who I knew hunted what I should shoot, and he came up with some brand recommendations for me, and he also suggested that I shoot a 20 gauge because I'm a woman. Well, and I think he was thinking of women as petite things who might not want to deal with recoil, but I'm 5'8", so I'm pretty sturdy. And it really wasn't necessary for me to shoot a 20 gauge, and I ended up getting a 12 gauge later. So if you want to get a 20 gauge, go for it, but don't let anyone tell you you should just because you're a woman or just because you're small. Make that decision on your own based on all these other factors we're going to talk about today. Another factor to consider, your intended quarry. So duck hunters overwhelmingly shoot 12 gauges, but 20s are becoming more popular. That's what I shoot now. I've gone back and forth, but I really like my 20. Sub gauges, especially 20s, are popular for upland birds. So I'm talking about pheasant and quail and such here. It's considered very sporty to shoot a sub gauge because you have fewer pellets in your shells. And here's a little note for you. You don't need a different type of shotgun for every type of hunting. People will sell you a turkey gun and a snow goose gun, but one shotgun is fine for everything. Don't feel like you have to go buy something different for every type of hunting you do. Next question, camo, wood, or synthetic? These are all guns that I have owned, and so as you can see, I've done wood, synthetic, and camo. Nice wood stock gun here. This is black plastic, and this is obviously camo. Here are my thoughts on that. First of all, don't buy a brightly colored shotgun if you plan to hunt anything that you are hiding from. And the reason I tell you that is while mammals can't see color, birds can see color quite vividly. So if you go out there rocking your hot pink shotgun and you're trying to hide from birds, they're going to see you. So I would strongly recommend that you avoid that. But if you want to go to the target range with those, you be you, have fun. Camo, it's really cool. Hunters really like it. But it adds cost. It adds typically an extra $100 to the cost of that gun. And that's the process they use. It's called dipping. They dip it in sort of a weird plasticky thing. That was my technical explanation. Synthetic is more durable than wood in wet environments. So a lot of duck hunters really like synthetic. And wood is prettier and easier for a gunsmith to alter. Now, I used that wood gun for duck hunting there, and it was fine. I took good care of my gun. So frankly, you can use any of the three of these and you're going to be fine. And I will tell you, in terms of hiding from prey, nothing saw my gun because it was wood or black or camo. Holding still is your best defense against being seen. All right, so that was it for the types of shotguns. And at the end of this, I'm going to tell you about a web page where you can learn about those resources a little bit more. But this is the main thing we wanted to talk to you about, which is gun fit. So this is one of the most important things that very few people seem to know about, and that is that guns have to fit. So most shotguns that you can buy at the store are designed for an average male. So someone who's 5'10", average build, and right-handed. We're going to come back to a little bit more about right-handed in a second. So if that doesn't describe you, you're going to have to adapt a little bit to make a gun fit you well. Now, like I said earlier, I'm 5'8". Height-wise and build-wise, I'm absolutely fine handling a gun that was designed for a 5'10" man. But if you're a foot shorter or a foot taller, then you have a few more issues there. So back to that right-handed thing. What I'm really talking about is being right eye dominant. And I'm going to stop my screen share for a second here and show you how to test your eye dominance. So this is actually really important. You have a dominant eye the same way you have a dominant hand. I'm right-handed, and I'm going to show you what my eye dominance is. So what I want you to do, play along with me here, is make a triangle like this and then shrink it a little bit, get a little bit tighter. And what you want to do is look at something. You can look at me on the screen right now, and focusing on that object, the screen, whatever you're doing, bring your hands back to your face. Keep looking, don't look at your hands until your hands hit your face. Check it out, that came back to my left eye. That means I'm left eye dominant. I'm going to come back to the screen share now. All right, so that's what we mean by eye dominance, and you actually really should shoot with your dominant eye, not your dominant hands. And I luckily knew that from hunter education before I started hunting, so I never shot my shotgun right-handed, even though I'm right-handed. You might think that's weird, you're not ambidextrous, you can't do that. If you never shot a shotgun before, your hands don't know the difference, so it's really no big deal. All right, so let's talk about why fit matters. This is a crucial difference between shotguns and rifles. So a rifle has front sights and rear sights, or a scope, and that helps you ensure that where you are looking is where the bullet will go. So with a shotgun, your eye is actually the rear sight. So your eye is positioned here, your cheek is positioned on the stock, and you end up looking down the barrel. And if your eye is in the right spot, it lines up with the bead on your gun, and you end up sending the shot downrange exactly where you want it to go. So for that to work well, you need your face to land on the same place on the stock every single time you raise the gun to shoot. So for that, the gun needs to fit. This is where I have another peculiar problem that I think Tish mentioned. Did I mention really long neck? Crazy long neck. And that means I have issues getting my head down on the stock where it needs to be. This is why I have so much empathy with people about gun fit. So there are three things that largely determine gun fit, and purists out there will take issue with this because there's actually lots of other things, but we're going to talk about the three big ones. The first is the length of the stock, which is also called length of pull. If you are really short and you are shooting a gun that's made for a 5'10" man, you're going to be stretching out to hold it, and it's going to feel really heavy and awkward and unbalanced to you. If you're really tall, you can also have similar issues. It's going to feel too small. It's going to be like a really tall person getting into a really tiny car. So the length of the stock actually can be one of the easiest things to address. You can shorten some stocks, and you can actually add spacers to some stocks if you happen to be a tall person. There's also two other factors called drop and cast, and I'm going to show you what cast looks like here. So this is a super exaggerated view, but in this overhead view, you see that the stock is bent to the right, and the reason for that is you want the butt to hit the shoulder right here and better position that right eye looking right down the barrel. So if you're left-handed, that stock is pointed in the totally wrong direction, and it's going to make it really hard for you to shoot that gun. So you can actually change the cast on many guns so that they're left-handed. So I actually do this on all my guns. I flip them to left-handed. So that's what cast is. Now, a bit about drop. So as we saw in the previous graphic, this is what you want it to look like. You want your eye looking straight down the rib of the gun through the bead at the target. So the stock, the drop of the stock affects how this looks. So if your drop is too high, you're going to be looking underneath the target instead of through the bead. And if you do that, here's what you're going to do. You're going to think you're shooting too low. You're going to raise the gun up here, and then you're going to end up shooting too high. So rule of thumb, if your eye is too high, you're going to shoot too high. And of course, the converse is true. If the drop is too low, you're going to be looking too high. You're going to adjust the gun, and then you're going to shoot underneath the target. Fortunately, these are things we can adjust on many, many guns. So if you think that an average gun is not going to fit you for any of these reasons, whether you're short or tall or you need to shoot left-handed, you have a couple options. The first is to buy a gun that fits correctly in the first place. The second is to buy a gun that can be adjusted to fit correctly. And the third is to adjust a gun that doesn't fit correctly. And I bring this up because I know so many new hunters, they take up hunting, they need a gun, and someone says, Grandpa Bob has a gun in his attic, you can use that. And often, you know, of course, that was a gun that was made for Grandpa Bob, not for you. So if that's the only gun you can work with, we'll talk a little bit about whether or not you will be able to adjust that. So if you want to buy a gun that fits, many manufacturers do make left-handed models. So that is a possibility for you. Many guns, as I mentioned, they come with stock spacers that you can add or subtract from the stock so that you can change the length of pull. There's at least one manufacturer that makes a line of shotguns that are designed for women, and they're called Siren. And they're made for the average woman, which is basically someone who's 5'4". And even though they're made for women, there's no pink on them, a little tiny hint of purple on some of them, but no pink. And if you happen to be a shorter man as well, that gun could be perfectly good for you. So that's an option if you don't mind going out and shooting a gun that was made for women. Nobody really needs to know. It's no big deal. So if you're under 5'2", in my experience, I have a lot of friends, a lot of women friends who are 5'2", 5 feet tall. Most of them have found that shooting a youth shotgun actually works for best for them. The only downside to that is not a lot of youth shotguns come in 12 gauge. So that's a consideration, but they really are happy with their youth guns. So that's a good option for you. So if you want to adjust your gun, some shotguns can actually be adjusted, and mostly I'm talking about semi-autos here, but you have other options as well. So a little bit about that. If you have a semi-auto, you see here, these red things are called shims. And when you change these shims, they're actually very slightly triangular. When you reverse them, you can change it from left to right, or you can change how much the stock is dropping or rising. So that is an option. If you are buying a gun and you want to know if it can be adjusted, first of all, ask the retailer if it can be adjusted. And if they don't know, because like I said, many people don't know that you can adjust shotguns, ask them if it comes with a shim kit. Most of them should be able to tell you that. If it comes with a shim kit, it can be adjusted. If you plan to switch it to left hand, you might want to make sure that the safety can also be switched. I reverse the safety on all my guns because the safety is on the trigger guard. So you need to be able to hit the safety and then pull the trigger. So I know some people will shoot with a wrong-sided safety, and it seems really awkward to me. So if you don't want to do that, make sure the safety can be switched. So typically, the manufacturers recommend that you take the gun to a gunsmith to have the safety switched. Like I said, I do it myself, but I have friends in some gun businesses, and so I've learned how to do this, and it's not terribly hard. You can also find all kinds of videos on YouTube about this. If it has a shim kit, the manual will probably tell you how to reverse the drop, or how to adjust the drop and cast yourself. And I'm going to show you a short video here to show you what that process looks like. And this is from a gun that I adjusted for myself. So this will take less than 2 minutes here.
Start by pulling the bolt back. Visually and manually check the chamber, close the bolt, and check the magazine tube to make sure it's also empty. First, pull off the butt pad, grab the skinny end of it, work its way out, and once it comes out, it's pretty easy to pull out the rest. Go in with a wrench. It'll take way more turns than this. I finish it with my finger and tip the gun. There's the nut. Now I remove the stock. Don't let it go flying. Tip it over. One more thing. Next, we pull off the cast shim. It comes off the gun at DX. If you turn it around, it'll be SX. Next, we remove the drop shim. It comes off the gun as B, 60 millimeters of drop. Now slip that over the recoil spring tube and make sure the letter is facing up here, like this. I chose A because I need 55 millimeters of drop. Next, the cast shim goes on. I shoot left-handed, so I chose SX. Now we drop the stock back on. Make sure it fits snugly. Now we grab the stock locking plate. It's really important that the letters match what you put in for your drop and cast. A for 55 millimeters, SX for left-handed cast. Drop it in over the bolt. Now use your mechanical grabber to pick up that washer. It makes it so much easier to drop it over the bolt. The nut I tend to drop in with my fingers so I can hand tighten it just a little bit before I go for the wrench. You want to tighten this until it's firmly in place. Now you grab the butt pad, pop it back in, and there you have it.
So that's it. It's a pretty simple process. I will tell you, it never goes as smoothly as that. I usually have washers flying all over the place, and it can be frustrating. But the reality is it's doable, and the manufacturer intends for it to be doable for you. So you just need a few tools. They'll tell you exactly what you need. So break action shotguns can also be adjusted, although if they're synthetic, it's a little bit harder, but you really need a skilled gunsmith if you're going to do these alterations, because here's what they do. They take the gun apart and they start carving down little pieces of it ever so slightly to get that gun to bend in a different direction. So it's kind of a cool process. This is my friend Dale Tate at Comanche Hills doing his alteration here. And that's what it looks like. So that is not a cheap process. I don't know if Dale is still doing this, but it can cost you $350, $450, $500. If you are looking for someone to do this alteration for you, I strongly recommend that you consult with a shooting instructor to see who they recommend. I would not take my gun to just anyone. So recommendations are key here, because obviously that's your precious gun that probably costs you thousands of dollars. So you got to be careful with it. All right, so that's it about fit. If people have questions, we can come back and talk about this more during the Q&A. So I wanted to go over a few tips for buying new and used shotguns. First of all, I want to tell you a bit about the process. If you've never done this before, I don't want you to be surprised when you get to the gun store, because here's the deal. It's not like buying a gallon of milk. It's a little more complicated than that. So first of all, there's a background check. You can't have a criminal background. You can't have a violent background or felonies. And there's a long list of things that would preclude you from owning guns. So they're going to do a background check. You need to certify that you have a gun safe or a trigger lock to keep that gun safe while you're at home. And if you don't have a gun safe or trigger lock, they'll sell you a trigger lock at the gun store, because they're not going to let you go home without one. If you don't yet have a hunting license, you're going to have to pay $15 to take, and then you need to pass a test about gun safety. And there's going to be a 10-day waiting period for picking up your gun. So even if you have no criminal past or anything that would prohibit you from owning a gun, you still have to wait 10 days to pick it up. And you do have to pay for it the first day. You don't get to wait to pay until the end. So if this is your first gun purchase, the good news is that when you go to buy ammunition for the first time, this purchase, this background check, will get you in the state system, which makes you eligible for a $1 ammo background check. If you're not in the system, you got to pay $19, and the background check can take several days. So this will smooth your process a lot going forward. So test driving, it's a crazy thing. People buy really expensive guns without ever having shot them before, which is not ideal. So my suggestion is, if at all possible, try shooting various shotguns before you buy a shotgun. So if your friends have them, say, hey, let me try shooting that. Like, you should feel for yourself. What do you think about break action guns? What do you think about pumps? And I can tell you, when California Waterfowl, my employer, does R3 programs, we often have loaner guns available for people when we're doing shooting instruction. And that's a great place to try out different models and brands. So do that if you possibly can. Some shooting ranges also have rental shotguns. Call ahead first before you go to make sure that they do if you don't have your own shotgun. I know of one range where you can actually try out guns that you can buy there. And I went there with a friend. She was ready to buy her first shotgun, and she went in with one gun in mind, and we ended up taking 3 guns out in the field for her to try out. And after shooting them all morning long, she decided that the one she thought she wanted wasn't actually the one she wanted, that she actually was more effective with a different one. So it was really cool that she got a chance to try it. All right. So cost, I strongly recommend that you buy the best gun you can afford. You get what you pay for is definitely a thing with shotguns. You really do get what you pay for. And I think, when you're talking about $150,000 guns, it's not that it's going to function that much better. That's a lot more about artistry. But in the normal range of shotguns that you're going to use for hunting, it's a big deal to get what you pay for. So personally, I would rather buy a high quality used gun than a brand new cheap gun, simply because it's going to be built better, it's going to be easier to care for, it's going to last longer. Many gun stores will sell guns on consignment, so you can check ahead about that. And a very important thing to ask is, do they stand behind the guns that they sell? If they do, that's probably a sign that they've had their gunsmith check it out to make sure it's in good functioning order. And you also want to know, if you get the gun home, you take it out to the range and it completely falls apart, can you go back to that gun store and get satisfaction on that product problem? And don't assume that just because someone's selling a gun that it means there's a problem with it. There's many reasons to sell a shotgun. I upgraded from 20 gauge to 12 gauge, and I sold my 20 gauge to a friend, and then I later regretted it and ended up getting a 20 gauge again. So I will cycle through guns pretty quickly, and they are perfectly good guns. So don't assume that it's just garbage. It's not a big fear that you need to worry about. All right, now a little bit about at the gun store. I got really lucky when I went to buy my first shotgun. I didn't know anything, but the one thing I did was I wanted to hold each of the guns that I looked at and see how it felt. So what you want to do is you shoulder the gun and you point it in a safe direction. People do this at gun stores all the time. So ask the clerk first, where can I point it? And they'll find a nice corner of the room where you can point it and not make people feel uncomfortable. I'm also going to recommend that you take a small mirror, like a little handheld mirror, or even a compact for makeup. And I'll tell you more later about why you want to do that. Now, if you do your homework ahead of time, you might know what gun you want, but if the employee suggests something different, ask them why they make that suggestion. So even if you've done your research, they may have a really good point. For example, you may think, I really want a nice fancy break action over-under side-by-side for duck hunting. And they may say, well, if you're going to go duck hunting, the gun's going to get awfully wet. You might want to consider this instead. So you may disagree with them. You may feel like they're trying to sell you something that you don't need, but it's definitely worth listening because generally they try to be pretty knowledgeable. Finally, gun store experiences can vary widely, especially for women. I will tell you, I live in Sacramento County and I shop at many gun stores in my area, and I have had great experiences with all of them. I love the gun counter staff. I feel totally respected, but I do hear stories from other women occasionally about how they're treated at the gun range. Things like, woman and a man go to a gun range together and the woman is the one buying the gun and the person behind the counter will just keep talking to the man instead of the woman. I also heard a really egregious one recently where a woman walks into a gun store, wants to buy a gun, doesn't even get to say anything. The guy at the gun counter takes one look at her, pulls out a pink pistol and smacks it down on the counter as if that could be the only thing she was there to buy. So here's my message to you. A gun is a major purchase. If you feel disrespected in a store, walk away. You don't have to give them your money. I know it's a big deal and you get all worked up for it and you think I'm going to go get that gun today, but you don't have to do that. And again, I don't want you to feel like this is a common experience, but I just do want you to be aware that's an issue and stick to your guns, no pun intended. All right. A note about safety. So many of you are bringing home a gun for the very first time. And so I want to talk to you about some important information here. First of all, it's a huge responsibility to have a firearm. So you should absolutely spend some time learning about gun safety. And your hunter education goes over a lot of gun safety tips, especially tips in the field, and then your basic instructions for gun safety, but you should research everything possible. I cannot go in this seminar, I cannot go over everything you need to know. But I will tell you some basic ones here. When you're handling your gun in the home, which happens when you're cleaning it or coming home from a hunt, you got to make sure it's not loaded. I never have a loaded firearm in my house. You need to treat it as if it is loaded. That's what my daddy taught me. It's like, always assume a gun is loaded. And that means you never point it at anyone. I'm such a purist about this that when I'm cleaning my gun and looking through the barrel and the barrel isn't attached to anything, I mean, really, it's just a hunk of steel. I won't point it at anyone because it's just a good habit to be in. So those are some of the basic tenets of gun safety. When you're not handling your gun, it's a good idea to lock it up somehow. So there are locking devices that render them inoperable, or you can get a gun safe. Gun safe is a great thing to have. A good gun safe is fireproof up to like 1400 degrees. So you'll find it's a great place to keep other important documents in the home that you want to keep safe. Highly recommend them. If you're transporting your gun in a vehicle, when you're transporting it in a vehicle, because almost everyone has to do that if they're hunting, you want to make sure that the firearm can't be seen from a window because you would not like it to get stolen. And in case there is a theft, it's really important when you bring your gun home to photograph it. So photograph it from both sides, left side, right side, And then also take a nice little snapshot of the serial number and store that in your phone. If there ever is a theft, that will enable you to give the police prompt and quick and complete information about the firearm. We definitely want to avoid our firearms being stolen though, because obviously it's criminals who do the stealing and we don't want our firearms to be used for criminal purposes. This is going to seem obvious, but I'll say it anyway. Little kids can think that a gun is a toy, so you have to be super, super careful around small children. And if you're following all these other safety rules, you're fine, but you need to hammer the point home to them that a gun is not a toy. You got to be really careful with them. Now, minors can hunt, and like I said, many of you may be preparing to hunt with your children. So kids can hunt as soon as they're old enough and smart enough to pass hunter education. There are some minimum age requirements for big game hunting, but with bird hunting, I've heard of 7-year-olds who have gone out past hunter ed and gone out and gotten their first turkey or gotten some other game. So when a kid goes through their hunter ed that early, think about it. Think about that 7-year-old brain. 3 years later, when they're 10, it doesn't hurt that you're continually emphasizing safety to them, because 3 years in the life of someone who's that young, they may have forgotten some of those tenets. So if you're hunting with a child, I would be quizzing them constantly on safety, like where's your muzzle direction? And what's this rule about handling your firearm? So continually emphasize that for safety, and you will be raising a child who everyone else feels safe to hunt around. Finally, if you have someone in your home who is at risk of committing suicide or committing domestic violence, it is essential to keep your firearm out of that person's hand. So it may be sufficient to use locking devices or a safe, but whatever it is, you need to be highly, highly aware of that. So that's something very important to keep in mind. Okay, we're getting close to the end here. I know people will have questions. So I want to talk a little bit about practicing with your new gun. It's very important to practice. You can't just buy a gun and walk into the field and start using it. It takes a while to get to know your gun. So the first thing, with shotguns, we are often shooting moving targets. And so there's rules about this. So if something is flying straight at you or straight away, it's point and shoot. You point the muzzle right at it. However, if it's something that's flying or running crossways to you, like a rabbit would be running, then what you do, it's like being a quarterback. I'm going to give you my entire knowledge about football here. So quarterback throwing a pass, the receiver's running this way. So the quarterback doesn't throw it at where he is right now. The quarterback throws it ahead where the receiver will be when the ball gets to him. So that's what we do with shotgun shooting, and how much you lead, that shot gets thrown ahead varies with the angle of the target to your gun. So I'm going to show you a very short video here that demonstrates exactly what that lead is like. It might surprise you, and I will tell you that the sporting clays you see in this video are about this big.
Narrow lead here.
This is a straightaway target. So I was barely edged ahead of it. This is a crossing target.
That was pretty.
So isn't it crazy how much lead I had to have on that? You would think that, like, everyone thinks that bullets and shot shells and shot pellets travel at the speed of light or something, and they don't. They're actually surprisingly slow. So do yourself a favor when you get your shotgun and take lessons. You can call local shooting ranges and ask if they have instructors or have any instructors that they can recommend. Your friends or your spouse or your significant other might be a great shot, but they also might not know how to teach. Some people are just instinctive shooters, and an instinctive shooter doesn't know how to teach a non-instinctive shooter. By the way, non-instinctive, no hand-eye coordination. I was a terrible shot for years. I got good only through practice. And I will put in a plea here for you to not ask your spouse or significant other to teach you how to shoot. I think in the personal relationship like that, we feel this entitlement to get a little impatient with each other. So that makes a spouse teaching someone just a little bit too fraught. And fortunately, my boyfriend, who's the one who got me into hunting, he was very clear. He never even offered to teach me. He's like, you go take a lesson. I'm not going to do that. And that was actually really smart. I appreciate it, because he's also an instinctive shooter. It would have been hard for him to teach me what to do as a non-instinctive shooter. Shooting ranges, you have choices when you are shooting shotgun. So I would go to the range once or twice a month during the off season, because this is like sports. It's like baseball or golf, where you need to get the muscle memory to do this efficiently. So if you shoot trap is a going away shot. You stand in front of a bunker and the clays fly out at very slight angles. And that's really good if you're planning to hunt quail or pheasant. Skeet is what I showed in that video. You move around a semicircle, which effectively changes the angle of the target to your gun. That's fantastic for duck hunters and dove hunters. And I personally feel like skeet is the best all around. It presents you all the angles. And then there's sporting clays. Sporting clays is cool. You walk around, it's like golf. You walk between stations, and it's cool because they have target presentations where it's designed to mimic hunting scenarios. On the downside, however, it's also designed to be challenging. So there are shots at clays that I would never take in the field. For example, a target that's 8 yards from me, I'm never going to shoot that because it's so close that my shot pellets would be tight and dense and they would destroy the meat. And that's not why I hunt, to destroy the meat. I'm hunting for the meat. They also have shots that are really far away, and I also don't like taking long shots when I'm hunting. But sporting clays is super, super fun. Great day in the field with friends. So if you have a friend in the country, or if you want to go out to BLM land or something, just make sure that shooting is allowed when you do that. A friend with a clay thrower can help you with your practice. And there are both mechanical clay throwers that they can trigger with some sort of device, or even a hand thrower. So those plastic things that you use to throw tennis balls for your dog, they make something similar for throwing clays. Now, for safety issues, the person's going to be standing next to you, so it's going to be an away target. You can't really do a skeet presentation with your friend because you don't want your friend standing in front of you. But it's definitely an option if you need to do things on the cheap. Finally, home practice. You can actually practice at home. And I'm going to say here, unloaded gun, you're in your house, your gun should be unloaded anyway. And you might want to close your curtains so the neighbors don't look at you and say, wow, why is that person swinging a gun inside that room? In my neighborhood, believe me, no one asks. So you can perfect your gun mount using a mirror. And I said I'd come back to why you want to take a mirror to the gun store. And here's what you do. So I will stand up and I will aim my unloaded gun at a mirror. I actually have one here in my office, and I can point the gun at the mirror. And what I'm looking to see is my pupil positioned behind the bead? So if you look right here, that's where the bead is. So I want my pupil right behind the bead. If your head is positioned that way, you're going to be good to go. So I will sit there and do that and close my eyes and remember what it feels like, exactly where the gun is on my cheek. This is what you can do with a mirror. So this handheld mirror, it takes another person to help you out, unlike a wall-mounted mirror, but you hold it up against the front of your gun. You make sure it's flush with the end of your gun, and then you can hold the gun and look down into the mirror and see if your pupil's in the right place. So if you want to make sure a gun fits you when you go to the gun store, you can take a mirror and give that a try there. I also practice mounting my gun. I do this even though I've been hunting now for 15 years. I practice all the time because it's important to keep that muscle memory going. So I will practice from a standing position and I will practice from a seated position. And often what I will do is I will mount the gun and then I'll swing back and point to that mirror and see if my pupil is in the right place. Doing this frequently will make the action seem very natural to you. I also practice swinging the gun, typically up along the ceiling line, just because I hate swinging a gun, sideways like that. And I will actually say bang, bang. And that seems really stupid, but here's the thing. As with baseball and golf, follow through is really important. If you stop swinging the gun, you're going to miss behind the target. So I say bang, bang, just to get used to continuing to swing the gun. And that was it. Oh my goodness, we have gone over so much, and I've seen there's some chats and some questions popping up. So I am very, very excited to now take your questions.
Yes, Holly, that was great. I loved the use of video and your tips for navigating your gun shop experience. That was all great. We do have some questions, so we're going to jump right in because I know that we're going to go a little bit over today because of how many questions we got in. So first question, I recently started duck hunting and noticed that my wader clips get in the way of shouldering the gun. Anything I can do to make my gun fit better while wearing waders so I don't have to take my straps down?
It is one of the most ridiculous things about wader design that they put these giant buckles right here on your shoulder. So what I recommend is you walk around with that side unbuckled. Don't change your gun fit to compensate for a big stupid buckle. So I will usually just have that buckle tucked into my waders. And actually I have a new pair of waders now that buckles in the back. So yeah, that's what I would do. And your waders are going to stay up fine with just one strap hooked in. Good question.
That was good. All right. Next question. Any tips for when I try to take my shotgun apart to clean it? I'm mortified I won't be able to put it back together. You made it look so easy in your video.
Yeah, people think my shooting video makes it look easy too. They're like, wow, you're a good shot. And it's like, you didn't think I was going to show you the misses, did you? So here's a couple important things. First of all, have a very clean surface that you're working on. If you have a white sheet that you can sacrifice, put that down on the floor so you can see all of your parts. They're going to get filthy. So it's a sheet that you're going to sacrifice. If you're really worried about it, go through the process of having someone video you taking it apart, and then you can see what came apart when you were taking it apart. The other thing is, I'm a huge fan of this RTFM. Read the freaking manual. Your gun comes with a manual that tells you exactly how to take it apart and put it together. Now, I'm a connoisseur of manuals, and sometimes I don't think manuals do a great job, but it's better than nothing. And I know reading a manual is not really fun for most people, but if you read slowly, like believe me, with my gun manuals, I go over them again and again. It's like, okay, what are they saying here? Where did this part come from? So I think that's your next best bet. So read the manual, video it, and have a super clean surface, and don't let people run through it and send washers flying all over the place. Great.
While you were talking, we had this pop up. What supplies do you need to clean the gun?
You can actually get gun cleaning kits at the same gun store where you buy your gun. So with a shotgun, the cleaning kits are related to the gauge of the gun because there are brushes that will go through the barrel. So make sure you get the correct kind. And I would definitely start with a kit. That's a super solid start.
Okay. And moving on to the next question. I love this person's vulnerability to ask this, but this is them talking, sort of embarrassing, but I'm a bigger guy and my chest gets in the way of raising my shotgun. How can I find a gun that I can shoulder?
Consider, first of all, when I talked about the women's shotguns, that was another issue, that whether you're bigger because you're carrying a little bit of extra weight or because you're a bodybuilder, you don't need as much of a stock. So that's one thing you can do. There's also something that gunsmiths can help with. And I'm just going to get delicate here and talk about one of the other elements of gun fit. And that is for women, especially if they have large breasts, the bottom of that gun, that's the heel. I think it's the heel, might be the toe, that can sort of dig in painfully. And a competent gunsmith can change it so that twists out a little bit so it's not so painful. But I would definitely, if you've got some size on you, you may just need a shorter stock that may help you out a little bit. That's my best suggestion. Very good question. And thank you so much for asking it.
Yeah, and thank you. Those were good tips. Okay, question 4. Can you talk about shotgun slings? How do I know what type of sling to buy?
Oh gosh, this is probably one of the easiest choices because frankly, they're cheap. If you hate your sling, you can just replace it and buy another. So increasingly, slings are available with quick releases. So they're fairly easy to get on and take off. The reason I like one with a quick release is that if I'm hunting in a place where I feel like the sling will get in the way, for example, duck hunting, if you're sitting out there in the tules, sometimes you'll raise your gun and you'll find the tules got caught up in your strap. I have absolutely missed ducks because that happened. However, also when I'm hunting public land by that, I'm carrying a lot of gear and having the gun on a sling matters quite a bit. So I would go see what's available at the store where you buy your guns, see what they recommend, but I would definitely recommend one that will go with a quick release. Now, I will tell you this, if you have a wood gun, the gun may not have the apparatus that you need to hook a sling to it. So just be aware that you might have to sink a screw into it, or if that makes you nervous with a big investment, a gunsmith can do that for you.
Okay, thank you. And what is a trigger lock and how does that work?
I have a gun safe, so I actually have never had to use a trigger lock before because I just put them in my safe. So there are cable locks that what they end up doing is they go through the action of the gun so that you literally can't close the gun to load it. So there's information about trigger locking devices. They might be able to help me out with the URL here. Project Child Safe is a project of the National Shooting Sports Foundation, and they have lots of information about keeping children safe at home. And then you can, at the gun store, they can also talk to you about what kind of trigger lock options you have for your shotgun.
Perfect. Okay. That is all of the questions we have, which doesn't put us too far over. So great job, Holly.
I've got to go back and share. I promised I would share my email address. So.
Oh yeah, and we could put that in the chat as well so that it's there.
Oh, and I did promise that I mentioned one other thing. On Cal Waterfowl's website, we have a page where there are shotgun buying tips. So what your options are if you're not a 5'10" guy, what your options are if you're on a budget, and a little bit more detail about the personality test for buying a shotgun. I have a YouTube channel where you can see that complete video about shooting. And this is my email address. I will respond to you, hheiser@calwaterfowl.org.
Real quick, Holly, we had a last minute question come in. How did you get into shooting? I know you mentioned your boyfriend, but was that it? Just something to do as a couple, or?
No, he started hunting a few years before I did when we both lived in Minnesota, and he was hunting rabbits and squirrels. And at the same time, I was training for a marathon, and I didn't really want to go out at 5 a.m. for a training run on Saturday and then at 5 a.m. On Sunday to go hunt rabbits in 3 feet of snow. So I'm like, okay, thanks, but no thanks. And then we moved to Sacramento, and he looked up what's good to hunt in Sacramento. And man, we have fantastic duck hunting in the Sacramento Valley. So he decided to hunt ducks. He taught himself how to do this, which is amazing. And when he finally started bringing home quality ducks and cooking them, I was gobsmacked by how delicious they were. I have this memory of one night, it was me and him eating, it was whole roasted birds. We were digging into them. Duck fat was dribbling down our chins. The cat was circling the table. Meow, meow, give me some. And I looked at him shortly after that and I said, okay, I'm ready to start hunting now because I want a lot more ducks. So part of it was I missed him because he was out hunting all the time, but I really just wanted to eat more duck. I like duck a lot.
I feel like that could get anyone into it.
Yes, it could.
Real quick, what was the hardest part about becoming as proficient as you are?
Honestly, it was that I was so bad. I was always the last person picked in sports. I have no natural hand-eye coordination. I've had to work hard at it.
And your long neck.
My long neck, high cheekbones, often an issue for women. So it's hard I have to work really hard to get my head down on the gun where it should be. And it was frustrating. I mean, I think my first 3 years, I wasn't a very good shot at all. And I thought, like, what's wrong with me? I'm never going to be any good. And then two things happened. I bought a 12 gauge and I started practicing all the time. And between those two things, suddenly I was killing a lot more ducks. And I think the 12 gauge is part of it, but honestly, it's the practice, it's the muscle memory. And then a few years after that, I got to the point where I was hunting and I'd noticed it's like one shot down. So I tell people that because even if you're horrible, even if you have no natural talent for shooting, with practice, you can become really, really good. So I'm here to tell you, be patient, it will come. Just be diligent and practice and get that muscle memory going, and you got this. And then pretty soon you'll be helping your friends get started too.
Well, Holly, you've just been so empowering and awesome. And I hope that everything, we've been seeing people that have had to check out, but loved your presentation. So thank you so much for helping us all become more responsible hunters and for spending some time with us today. We are going to wrap up. If we didn't get to your question or you have more questions, remember, you can always reach out to us on the R3 webpage. That might help you find some answers, or you can always email us at statewide R3 program. And we'll put that in the chat again. We did it earlier, but we've had so much going on. Both of those contacts, we'll put in the chat for you so you don't have to scroll all the way up. While you're on the R3H3 or, take a look at what we have coming up for R3H3. We have several in the month of April, a beginner's look at California halibut and sandy beach surf fishing on April 16th, and then a beginner's look at spring foraging on April 30th. Registration is open for both of those, and then we'll be posting our future ones very soon. You can also find registration links by visiting the R3 calendar, by watching our social media, or by signing up to receive monthly hunter angler updates through our online licensing portal. And additionally, when you visit the event registration page, you'll see our advanced advanced hunter clinics offered through the hunter education program. And I really encourage you to check out those. We have some good things coming up for April for that as well. Archery turkey hunting event coming up next week. And then also those big game tags. We have an event on that. So check those out. Lastly, a huge thanks to all of you, our attendees, for really taking this step to educate yourself. Round of applause from Holly and I for taking that next step to, become the best hunters, most responsible hunters, anglers, and foragers that we can be. So thank you so much. This session's recording will be up on our R3 page in the coming days. We hope you have a great weekend again. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.